You have two options, and only two options. You can either increase the amount of money that you bring in, or you decrease the amount of money that goes out, your expenditures. Those are the only things you can do. If that number at the end isn't positive, well, then you're in trouble. And right now, our number isn't positive. We bring in a lot of federal money. So if we wanted to be independent, we have to do one of two things. We either decrease our expenditures or increase our income. And mining for Idaho, it's low-hanging fruit. Well, of course you mine stuff.
Good morning, Idaho. Welcome to the Local Yokel Idaho podcast, where we talk about what is going on in the wonderful state of Idaho. For those tuning in for the first time, we like to have a little bit of banter before we get into the stories, but I understand if you're short on time. So we have provided timestamps in the description so you can jump to the stories that you are interested in. For those joining us for the banter, thank you. It's one of my favorite parts of the show to kind of talk with John and have a little bit more of a candid conversation with you all. Hope you all had a wonderful week. For me, it's been quite a rewarding one with friends and family and taking different hiking trips now that the weather is kind of allowing of that, which, speaking of good friends, John is going to be co-hosting with me again today.
Yeah, I am here, Tyler, and I am happy to be here. I'm happy to be able to talk. End of last week, I came down sick with whatever crud is going through the Treasure Valley, and I was asleep for the majority of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But now I'm awake, and my voice is still a little goofy.
We can't notice it.
Sinus something. I'm glad you can't. I definitely can. My voice sounds weird in my head. I was doing some recording earlier today for a YouTube video I'm trying to get out tomorrow, and I don't sound right.
Like, no, is that something on my EQ? Is the low end or the high end? You're like, no, that's just me. I'm getting over a cold, and that's just the reality of that.
Yeah, I was actually playing video games with my brothers, and I sounded just dead. I couldn't handle my own voice. It was rough.
I will admit, me and John work hand in hand when recording and editing and different stuff for the show. But after I get done editing it, I've had a couple people, do you listen to your show? I'm like, no, I do not. And they're like, why? Why not? If you've done such a good job, won't you enjoy it? And I'm like, I will enjoy it. The problem is when you're involved in the editing side of this, and anybody out there will know this, you've probably listened to the episode like 6 times over because you've gone through and you've double checked and reviewed and done this and done that. And you're just like, nope. So I can fully admit that even if you do a wonderful job, you might listen to certain segments where you're like, man, I didn't know I had that in me type of thing. But listening to like the whole show, I can totally agree not watching that back. But I mean, coming back to the sickness or cold, it seems to be something that is moving through the valley. I've heard some families that were like, the whole family, I met them at an event, like on like a Saturday or whatever. And then the next day I get a call or text and like, yeah, we're all down sick right now. So be aware if you need to get elderberry or other things to help boost your immune system. So at least here in the southern part of the state, there seems to be a bit of a cold that's moving through everyone.
Yeah, it's a bit ridiculous at this point, but I guess it kind of just is what it is.
It goes in phases. It is the reality that we have in 2024, it seems, with colds is that, I remember a time when it was like, okay, you had colds, and it's like they had a cold, and everyone was just periodically having colds. But then I swear after COVID, everyone's more like focused on it or something, and thus you hear it more. But it just seems like colds now go in waves where there'll be a period between waves where it's like everyone's fine, and then there'll be a period where everyone's not fine. Everyone's sick. And it's working through everyone, and then it's not. That might just be the fact of people are keeping more track of it or talking about it more. I have no idea, but it is something I think that's interesting pre-COVID or post-COVID. Yeah, post-COVID.
Yeah, I'm down with you on that. It does seem like more people are sick more often, and
I'm not a doctor. I could try, but I can observe at least that.
Yeah, my wonder is if we're not more sensitive to that data now than we were.
Right.
When was COVID? Was that 2020?
2020,
4 years ago now? Yeah. More sensitive to that than we were 4 years ago.
It is crazy to think it's 4 years because I was talking to a gentleman and, we were talking about some bills or legislation or whatever. And he was like, yeah, this was passed in 2019. My brain's like, okay, so that was recent. And then he turned around and said, yeah, that's 5 years. And I was like, what? 5? Looking at the roof at me, I'd be like, no.
Right. Yeah. It's been insane.
Yeah, 2019 hit, and I swear, time put on the afterburners a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Which, speaking of time, something to update all of you about, trying to keep up with the legislative session as it is ending. We're going to be taking a week break. For you guys, what that means is that you're not going to immediately see it, so there'll be this episode that'll be going out on Sunday, obviously, because this is a Sunday show, and then there'll be one more midweek report that'll be coming out on upcoming Wednesday, but then the following, so that would be April 7th, and then the Wednesday, which will be April 10th, there will not be a midweek or a Sunday show coming out on those dates. Reasons for that is because we're working on some really cool stuff, and I wanted to take some time to get the regular running of things out of the way so we could get that all polished and get that ready, because I think you all are going to be very excited and will enjoy that, but it requires just a little bit more time and effort, which there'll be a trailer coming out for that, and also just a fact of resting, like I mentioned, with after the legislative session. It's a really busy, really it's like drinking from a fire hose. So kind of getting a break from that for myself, for writing and different stuff, and then just some spring cleaning for some other things that have built up on the docket for the show. But don't worry, I'm fine. Wanted to let you guys all know about that it's not something to be worried that, maybe I got in a car wreck and then they're like, wait, what? No, what's going on? No, I'm fine. Everything's fine. Just taking a much needed break. Which, with that break, I'm actually going to be going up to northern Idaho with the family, up around the Lewiston area to go do some stuff there. So you will probably see some footage of that trickling out onto the social media and different things.
Well, that'll be cool.
Yeah.
That'll be a fun trip.
I know most of the time I've gone up there, it has been in the fall. This will be the first time going up there in the spring. So I'm hoping that means I'm going to get a lot of rain and then mist and clouds and stuff that are coming to the mountains, because shooting with a drone with that is just dreamy. And then if everything's green and lush and you're getting all that precipitation, that'll look super nice. But if it's snow, I'm not going to say no.
Yeah, no, that would be fun if it's all snow up there.
Right. But speaking of stuff up north, if any of you are listening, I'm hoping there's some listeners up north. I don't know. I'm hoping. I'm assuming. If there's some places around the Lewiston, Clarkston area or on the way up there that you recommend dropping by and visiting with my family and stuff, then please let me know, because that would be really cool to go see. And if it's a recommendation that one of you guys give and I'm able to make it, I will post that with the name of the person who recommended that to me on social media, so you can get a little recognition there. But yeah, send that in. It'd be really cool if there's some nice places, especially for food. I'm a foodie. I like to try those nice mom and pops and different things. So if you know of a really, really good place for Mexican or Italian or even Southern, that would be awesome. I would love to hear about that. And speaking of things with the legislative session, what has been signed end of the session? When you hear this, legislative session, as I have alluded to in the banter, will be over for the most part, and will be left with just the governor signing or vetoing bills, which usually gives us about 5 days until it's all wrapped up, unless there's a veto and then we have another vote and stuff. But with that said, it is always interesting to see what truly gets passed when all the smoke is settled, because during the session there's arguing, there's debating. So we made a list here of some of the biggest / interesting bills that the governor has signed into law as of Friday, March 29th, 2024. So we're going to go through them here and give you an overview with a mix of some discussion in here, which, diving into them here, what is our first one here, John?
House Bill 620 with regards to knives. So this adds to the existing law to provide that a political subdivision shall not enact certain rules, ordinances, or taxes regarding knives, to provide certain exceptions, and to provide that certain rules and ordinances from a political subdivision shall be null and void. This is one we talked about several shows ago, and I remember being in agreement with you on the majority, if not the entirety of this bill. I think it's a good idea. So I'm glad for one that this is going through.
Yeah, it basically, from what I remember from it, it is extending the Second Amendment or the different gun laws that we have in the states over to knives. This is also, if I remember in the text, like you said, it's extending to manufacturers to a certain level to give certain protections to them, which is also cool. Buck Knife Company up north, you're probably pretty happy. But then the second one we have here is Joint House Resolution 5 related to elections. Amends existing laws to provide that individuals who are not citizens of the United States cannot vote in any election in the state of Idaho. So I'm going to put this out. First off, it's a resolution. So for what I'm remembering, it doesn't have any teeth, but it is kind of giving forward a statement that then can set precedent in the future for something else to be passed. That's saying that the Idaho legislature is saying that, yes, if you're not a United States citizen, don't get to vote. So become a citizen if you want to vote, type of thing.
Well, I know some other states either are allowing or allow non-citizens to vote in local elections.
Right.
So It seems like we're
being consistent.
Right. Well, and if it's not in our state constitution, which I don't know off the top of my head, I don't think I've ever actually read the Idaho state constitution. But if it's not in the Idaho state constitution that only citizens can vote, then it probably should be.
Yeah, it might be, but I think overall a good thing to see. And then one that's also been a bit of a hot topic, House Bill 596, immunization, amends existing laws to allow students of majority age to submit a signed statement for exemption from immunization requirements. Here again, this one I have not dug into and read a ton, but I think here again, as we've talked about in the show before, Idaho has some of the highest rates of people bowing out of getting vaccines and immunizations in the state, or not in the state, in the nation. So something like this, I think, is a natural progression of you see where the populace is and those desires are, and then that's showing itself out in legislation here.
Yeah, this is another one that we talked about, and it makes sense to me to protect individuals against requirements for immunizations.
Right. Have some certain level of individual freedom in the decision of what you're injecting into your body.
Yep. It's kind of important. Right.
And then another one that's going to be a little bit of a snooze one, but something to be aware of. And for people out there, I know it's going to be an important thing. And I didn't know, I missed this. Number 4, House Bill 646, counties amends existing laws to revise the boundaries of Benewah County, Bonner County, Clearwater County, Kootenai County, Lotta County, and Shoshone County. So this one, I'm not quite sure of all the implications, but it is something that has passed. So if you're in those counties, you might want to be involved in that process of what those counties will then end up looking like. Then number 5, we have House Bill 645, Schools District Board of Trustees amends existing laws to revise provisions regarding school board recall elections, vaccines, and quorums. Probably a lot there to check into. So if you have kids in the public school system, that is something I would definitely look into because that got signed and passed. I don't think we actually had a segment where we talked about this. This is one of those that we missed. But something to be aware of there. Number 6, House Bill 630, related to counties, amends existing law to revise the boundaries of Cache County and Minidoka County. There again, if you live in those counties and are listening, you might want to look into that and be involved in that process. Something to be aware of there. Then a bill we have talked about, Senate Bill 1374, Concealed Weapons, amends existing laws to establish provisions regarding concealed weapons on certain properties owned by the state of Idaho. So that comes from our episode that we did about Scott Herndon and the different things with public land or public venues, how much authority they have in your concealed carry or right to carry arms on those areas if there's a private entity that is renting out a public area.
Yeah, that was a good one from what I can remember.
Yeah, just because the state rents out a piece of public property out to a private entity doesn't mean it doesn't lose certain inherent rights that since it's a public place that, you know, you get to carry your firearm because us in Idaho like our guns a lot.
Because it's important.
Which, there again, hot topic issues. The 8th one is House Bill 668, no public funds for gender transition. Pretty self-explanatory in that first statement. Adds to existing law to prohibit the use of public funds for gender transition procedures, which this one, I don't think we talked about on the show, but I am very excited that passed, and I think any conservative or Christian, that for that matter, in the state is very excited about this.
Yeah, this is one that I know, like you said, I know we didn't talk about, but I also know that this is a good thing. So I'm glad that this one ended up passing.
Yeah, similar to other discussions we've had about the gender thing, the taxpayers have a right to say where they want that funds to be able to go. And in a representative government, if the people don't want their money going to gender transitions, it shouldn't. And for lack of a better word, the will of the people is acted here. I'm surprised Little did not veto this. because last year there was a bill related to minors having gender treatments or whatever. I think I want to say that was House Bill 71 or 72 or something number like that. And he was sitting there and saying he was not going to sign it. So I'm surprised he didn't try to stop this, because this is just a progression of that bill from last year. Last year was just saying, hey, you can't do this for minors. Now it's a progression of saying, hey, it doesn't matter what the age is. You just don't do that with public tax dollars.
Yep, I would be in agreement with that. Then, and that sounds good with me. But talking about minors, House Bill 465 also passed, and this is for crimes against children. And this amends and adds to existing law to provide for the crime of visual representations of the sexual abuse of children, and to revise provisions regarding the Internet Crimes Against Children Unit. And this is another one I think we've talked about a couple times. And again, this seems great to me. I'm happy that we are updating laws to match the changing technological landscape. And
right.
So this is a good thing.
Right. The stated purpose for this one is that the legislature amends criminal child pornography and sexual exploitation of children law to include artificial intelligence generated sexual depictions of children, wherein the depictions appear to be that of a real child. And then it goes into penalties and stuff added. So yeah, this I think is great, that we're not sitting here trying to expand the role of government. Some people might try to argue that. My 2 cents is you're just saying, hey, we take eternal principles and we apply them to ever-changing situations. And one of those is that we have these AI systems that are super cool and advanced that can generate these images. And I think it'll be great in so many other ways. But one of those drawbacks is because we're sinners and we're fallen human beings, we're going to abuse that stuff we make. And so updating this legislation in such a way that it is accounting for those new developments and the uses that as sinners we will do with it, I think is a really, really good proactive step.
Yeah, I agree. AI technology is one of those things that is advancing and expanding super fast. And like most other things, people are going to find ways to work around the law. But just because people work around the law doesn't mean there shouldn't be a law around what is right and wrong.
Well,
so
if we believe in objective truth, then we know what's on the ledger of the law. It doesn't matter if it is on the ledger or not. We believe it's objective right and wrong, and we should update our laws in such a way that we can prosecute based on that objective truth. And speaking, I guess, of laws and ways that we run things, number 10, we have Senate Bill 1235. Library board elections amends existing law to change library board elections from once every 6 years to once every 4 years. And I'm kind of indifferent. I get the idea behind it. It's trying to increase the turnover rate because there's been more concern about the libraries and what's going on with that, and trying to decrease those term limit times so you have quicker elections that people can still remember the things that happen, because sometimes in politics people can have a short memory span, I think is a really, really good thing to have happen. So then, kind of also speaking of things related to education, we have number 11, House Bill 66, abortion amends existing law to prohibit abortion providers from furnishing materials or instructions related to sex education curricula. So this one we didn't talk about, but obviously with Idaho having, I think, one of the best abortion laws in the nation, I think this is just a natural progression of it moving forward to be like, no, you're not gonna get into a whole bunch of weird stuff.
I'm glad that this is a law that we're putting on the books again. So right. And then similarly, a thing that I know a lot of people have been happy to hear about, and a lot of people didn't even know was the thing that we got repealed. We have number 12, House Bill 617, Syringe and Needle Exchange, repeals existing law to remove the Syringe and Needle Exchange Act, which I know that's been something that's been spearheaded by the Idaho Family Policy Center. So if you like that being repealed, might want to give them a thumbs up on top of the senator that's been working with them on that. I think this is a really great thing to do. We don't need to be spending money on giving people clean needles to inject drugs. We really should not be removing the consequences, but we should be giving them avenues to get over their addiction. Yeah, so the next one that got passed was the Senate Joint Motion 103 with regards to water. So this was that states finding on the legislature and opposes the removal or breaching of the dams on the Columbia Snake River system and its tributaries, which I remember talking about this also, and I agree that breaching dams is probably not in our best interest unless we can prove really good reasons for it.
This, I know, in a certain way, comes because of some stuff that Mike Simpson is doing. As John has said, we've talked about in the show before. I personally believe if you are a person who believes in clean energy and wanting to do what's great for the environment, which is all that this is guised under, right? Keeping the dams is the most environmentally friendly thing you can do, because they've been built, I don't know, I want to say like 40, probably more than 40 years now since they're building. That means all the, carbon emissions, if you want to talk about that went into their construction, all the time, all the labor, everything. We've already gotten that back in spades because they're not emitting any carbon emissions. They're just harnessing the power of water moving through them. Secondly, if you want to say that they have a big environmental effect on things, the environment is, after 50 years of a dam being there, the environment has actually now adapted where it relies on that dam. There's probably a ton of different wildlife that have adapted their patterns and their migration because it's a large body of water. Water has effect on things. So I would argue taking them out would have even a larger environmental impact. And if we're talking about the financial part of it, that we'll remove them and we'll add an equal amount of solar or wind. How much carbon emissions does it take to put all those in, rather than just using the existing dams we have and upgrading them as need be to get more and more efficiency out of them, because it's been really crazy what we can do there. But that, me off my soapbox, I'm glad this was passed. I know it's not any bill to stop it in its tracks, nor are they going to be able to do that. But I think this is some really, really encouraging stuff, especially for us in Idaho, that me growing up here, I didn't realize until I traveled outside the state, are very blessed to have cheap and very dependable power compared to the rest of the nation.
Yeah, we legitimately do have cheap, dependable, reliable power, and that is a very, very good thing.
Which, on that with energy, then we have Senate Concurrent Resolution 11.3 related to energy, state findings of the legislature, and declares support for the development of clean and safe nuclear energy, which on that, if you're not going to go hydro, I say you go nuclear.
I think you're right. I think that's the only other one that makes sense.
Yeah, that as much as there's the scare of nuclear, but I feel like in 2024, we should be able to find a way to do nuclear.
Right. There are things to be concerned about it, but as technology has improved, nuclear has become much less dangerous than it used to be.
Plus, it's not a super new thing.
Right. Well, and speaking about technological advancement, we have Senate Bill 1274. This is with regards to higher education. This adds to existing law to prohibit institutions of higher education from requiring diversity statements as a condition of employment or admission. And I saw even in my newsfeed earlier, I think it was either this week or last, I don't remember which one. I saw this one go through. I read some articles, and this is, I think, a great thing. We're joining with several other states that have done this. This is good. I know in Texas specifically, getting rid of these statements has changed the way that Texas universities are spending money and are staffing people. And if this changes similar things here, that can only be a good thing.
Right, which I don't know if it might have been specifically on this bill, but we did have a segment talking about that, of how we have these universities, and in Idaho, we're giving them funding. We want education, but we shouldn't be investing that in institutions that then on the flip side are like, yeah, you all have traditional values and you're investing in us, but we're going to turn around and completely indoctrinate, for lack of a better word, in immoral practices and encourage those. No, as the taxpayers, we have a right to say, no, you can't. And also I would argue it is a form of discrimination if you're basing it all upon diversity and other things rather than merits. I mean, we can get into a discussion of how much we as a society should do things based on merit, but if there's any place that should be all about merit, I feel like it should be education.
It very much should be.
Which, moving on to our next one, number 16, House Bill 532, identification cards, amends existing law to remove a requirement that an individual must not have possessed a driver's license for the last 6 months to be eligible to receive a certificate education card. This one I'm not very sure on. This is something we might do a deeper dive on. If it's something that you all care about, then please message us about it. The basic gist that I got from this is if a person has had a driver's license in some state or Idaho recently, they can get a certificate of identification card. So it's kind of a catch-all for those rare ones. But you do have to have some previous form of identification to try to get this. So it's not like saying that you can get a card that's valid for voting when you aren't a citizen or something. So
Right.
that's the understanding I have. So not something to be super, super uppity about. And then our last one, number 18, House Bill 406, Uniform Controlled Substances, adds to existing law to provide for the crimes of trafficking in fentanyl and drug-induced homicide, which this happened earlier in the session, but basically going through and saying, hey, we're putting fentanyl on with illicit substances on that roster, that definition, right? And if someone dies from that drug, the person who gave them that trafficked that substance, can be prosecuted for drug-induced homicide. So you could be liable for that person's death, which is trying to just give it some more teeth to be like, don't do drugs in Idaho, because if something goes south, even if you think it's a good thing, which I don't agree with you with, but even if you do and you're deciding you're going to skirt the law, we're going to make it even more razor sharp that when you do get caught, it's going to sting a lot. So maybe just don't do it.
Yeah, I think that's the key. And this is one that I definitely agree with. This is a good thing for our state.
Oh, yes. On the whole, going through all these, and it wasn't like I was trying to find all the positive ones. I was just going through and being like, okay, cool, that's something people care about. And there's probably other ones I don't know. We'll have links in the description of the show notes where you can go and see the full list of all the bills that have been signed or not signed, and check on ones that, as of the recording of this, there might be other ones the governor has signed or vetoed. But we really wanted to give you guys an overview of like, hey, once the game's over, what's the final stats? Well, this is it. This is what we got. This is what's passed. Happy or sad. This is what's kind of moved through with the legislature. Hey there, since you made it that far through all those different bills, it probably means you've enjoyed the show thus far, and that probably means you want to keep up with all things Idaho. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button or follow button on YouTube, Rumble, or Twitter. Not to mention, if you found our content valuable and think it might benefit others, please like and share it. Also, for our audio-only listeners on platforms like iTunes or Spotify, we'd love to hear your thoughts, so please rate the show and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us a ton to improve the channel as a whole. With all that said, thank you for your support and for being part of our local yokel Idaho community. Together, hopefully, we can keep Idaho informed, engaged, and involved in this wonderful state. Now, let's dive into the next story, which I think I teased a little bit earlier, Idaho's mining heritage. With the wrapping up of the legislature, which I'm so happy for, it has given us a chance to research other topics other than politics. This one, but Idaho's mining history, is one of them. We'll be diving into how Idaho got the nickname of the Gem State and how you can experience it. We'll be exploring the history of Idaho's mining and how it has shaped the state and been part of it since its founding. We'll also be examining how mining is not dead in Idaho and how you can experience it for yourself. So, to start off with that, to kind of give some good context, because I even, growing up here, didn't know much of this, let's first go into kind of, I guess, the timeline there of events with mining history in Idaho.
So yeah, in 1860, mining began to be a significant activity in Idaho with the discovery of gold near Pierce in the northern part of the state. This discovery, which marked the beginning of Idaho's first major industry, mining, led to thousands of prospectors coming to the state. Just 2 years later, in 1862, gold was discovered again in the Boise Basin. This second discovery of gold led to one of the larger gold rushes in the Pacific Northwest, which I can understand. If you're coming up into the Boise area, then sure, that sounds like a great place to go to pan for gold. A year after that, in 1863, with the gold rush attracting thousands of prospectors to the region, it created towns like Placerville and Idaho City, which at the time was the largest city in the Northwest. All of this played a crucial role in the establishment of the Idaho Territories with the help of Abraham Lincoln. A decade or two later, in the late 1870s, silver and lead were discovered in the Owyhee district in the southern part of the state, which ended up fostering the famous city, Silver City. And then in the 80s, just a couple years later, silver was discovered in Coeur d'Alene area, which is now known as Silver Valley for a good reason. The valley became one of the world's largest producers of silver and led to the foundings of towns like Wallace, Burke, and Kellogg. Sadly, by the 80s and 90s, the Silver Valley became the site of intense labor conflicts, including strikes and violence between miners and mine owners. These conflicts were rooted in pay, workforce safety, and unionization. Not to mention, going into the mid-1900s, mining continued while gold mining declined, and Idaho's focus shifted to other materials such as silver, phosphate, lead, zinc, and a variety of semi-precious stones. Idaho became the largest producer of newly minted silver in the nation and the second largest phosphate producer.
Which, all that said, at its peak, Idaho documented over 8,000 mines and prospects. These mines varied significantly in size and output, focusing on a wide range of minerals, as we've learned. The main focus was first on minerals like gold and silver, but later on industrial minerals such as phosphate, garnet, and zinc. Thankfully, though, Idaho continues to be a significant player in the mining industry, focusing on silver, phosphate, and those other minerals. As a state, we're known for having very important minerals, except for oil, gas, and coal. Which, talking about those mines, those 8,000 mines, the biggest ones to kind of, if you want to go see them, some of them are actually still operating. In the southwest part of Idaho, there's the DeLamar mine, which was an open pit silver and gold mine in the Owyhee County, which operated from 1977 to 1998. It was described as the first modern open pit silver mine. It was located about 1 mile from the ghost town of DeLamar, which out of all the big mines, that was only a major one in the southwest, but over in the southeast, there was the Blackbird mine. Although now inactive, this mine was a significant source of cobalt, silver, and copper ore. It is part of Idaho's cobalt belt, which is considered a desirable stretch of ore for cobalt mining. And then there were also a lot of phosphate mines over there in the eastern part, with large pit phosphate mines, including the Ballard mine, a former open pit one located in the phosphate mining district. This region is one of the largest sources of phosphate ore in the United States. And then in northern Idaho, where the bulk of these really big mines ended up being, you have the Sunshine Mine, located between the cities of Kellogg and Wallace, which has been one of the world's largest and most profitable silver mines. It's one of the largest mines in the Coeur d'Alene mining district, which, as was mentioned earlier, is one of the richest metal mining areas in the world. Then you have the Bunker Hill Mine, which we've talked about before, situated in the Coeur d'Alene mining district as well, which is known as one of America's largest lead-silver mines, where lead and silver are found mixed together. And the last one is the Lucky Friday Mine. This is a deep underground silver, lead, and zinc mine, also located in the Coeur d'Alene mining district. It is one of the top 7 silver mines in the world, celebrating its 75th anniversary in 2017, and was expected to produce 156.25 to 165.63 tons of silver in 2023.
That's a lot of silver.
It is.
Yeah. But talking about that amount of silver, that brings us full circle. Idaho has had a rich history of mining, and we're called the Gem State for good reasons. As a state between 1860 and 1866, we produced 19% of all gold in the United States, that's a massive percentage. We also became one of the U.S.'s biggest producers of silver, and we continue to be, not to mention the lead and zinc mining that we did in the 40s to help with the war effort. Also, coming into the present, we as a state are a huge producer of phosphate, cobalt, and soon lithium, which the latter two are desperately needed for lithium batteries and electric vehicles. Also, silver is a massive one in the electronics industry as well. Silver is used a lot in a lot of different things. So we've got a lot of stuff that we're digging up out of the earth that are needed in present day American economy.
Right. Yeah. Going through this, I knew Idaho had a mining history, and so I knew when reading this, I was going to find some cool facts about how much mining. But the crazy part for me in doing all this is realizing how much Idaho still does mining. With that said, we've talked about it. If you've listened to the midweek report of the show long enough, there's different mines that have tried to come online, and we'll just say regulatory bodies have not been so friendly to them. But overall, especially with the silver side of things, Idaho is still been very active in that regard. Which, with all this info and that overview kind of given of stuff that's gone on with Idaho's history and what's currently going on with mining, I think one of the biggest takeaways you can take is we can still do stuff. I know there's a certain amount of, especially as conservatives, of doom and gloom that, manufacturing jobs are going overseas and that we can't do stuff. And it's just, 100% the fall of Rome, doom and gloom. It's apocalyptic, right? But I think a good example here, especially even with the regulatory world we live in, we can still do mining in America, and especially here in Idaho with the silver mines, upwards of like 165 tons of silver estimated in 2023 from one mine up in Coeur d'Alene. That should be something that's really, really encouraging. And it's also encouraging to know that we have those resources here.
Well, we have the resources. We also have the historical knowledge, and we have the historical ability to produce those things. So it's not even just that the material is here. It's that we have the know-how, we have the ability to get it out, and we have the ability to do it in an as environmentally friendly as you can be with this sort of thing. And we have a lot of people who are willing to do that work, which is great. That bolsters the economy Idaho's economy, but it also strengthens the U.S. economy in an amazing way, which is good.
Right. And I know that I gave this argument to a couple people during COVID, but it works well here. Our mining practices in the past may have not been as nice to the environment. But on the flip side, if we can put a man on the moon and furthest stretches of our solar system, I feel like, especially in any country on Earth, in America, we should be able to find a way to extract these resources and still have a minimal impact on the surrounding geology. Now, that doesn't mean you might, hollow out a mountain, but I think the thing that we're really caring about is that the rocks don't have feelings. We're trying to be really good stewards of, is the groundwater being affected by the refinement of these ores? Are the deer and different stuff being taken care of and they're not, irreparably being damaged or something? I feel like we can totally do that. We shouldn't just run away and say, mines are bad, and also over-regulating them to the extent that they can't do their job. We want to incentivize them, but we don't want to push them away, because if we can foster more of that to happen in Idaho and America abroad, it helps us as an independence of a state, right? If you want a state to be able to stand on its own 2 feet and say, we want this and we don't want that to the federal government, independent of who's in power, if it's a liberal or a conservative, that state needs to have a certain level of independence. And one of those key elements to doing that is its economy. Texas, I know, has done really great strides in trying to do that. Sometimes it backfires like their power grid, but you have to break a couple eggs to make an omelet there. But that's the main thing you have to do. A lot of Idaho's budget right now, if I remember correctly, it's like 40% of our total budget comes from the federal government. And if we want to find a way to release ourselves from that dependence, mining, a lot of Idaho's budget right now, if I remember correctly, it's like 40% of our total budget comes from the federal government. And if we want to find a way to release ourselves from that dependence, mining is something that we already have in our history. There's already the resources there that Idaho can invest in and grow, and can be something that not only that, but can help the rest of the nation as a whole, not just Idaho. Yeah. Because if the individual states in the union are strong, then the whole union is stronger because of it.
So I was having an interesting conversation with my brother-in-law a week ago. We went to see Dune Part 2, which fantastic movie.
If
you've not seen it yet, you've got to see it. And you've got to see it in theaters. It's a spectacle like no other.
Right.
Anyway, so coming out of that movie, we were talking, and one of the movies that's coming out recently is Civil War, which is Hollywood's depiction of what civil war in the United States could look like, which I kind of want to watch just to see what Hollywood thinks it would look like.
It sounds interesting.
It sounds interesting. But the question that was brought up, which states could actually secede? And, even getting outside of like the geopolitical realm, just thinking economically, what states even could secede from the Union? Texas would be one that could. You talked about the issues with their power grid. One of those issues, I think, is they agreed with Germany that we need to do away with nuclear power and coal and anything else and go fully with renewables. And so Texas is very reliant on solar and wind. And that's one of the issues we've seen with their grid the last couple winters, is they have too much of that non-reliable energy, and they don't have enough of the reliable anymore.
I know the main crux with that, I don't know if you heard about this, but from my end on that, when I commented on it, is that most other states in the union, they actually are hooked up to a national power grid. And so if one state has issues, another state can help it out. And Texas, in the interest of being independent, because welcome to Texas, they weren't hooked up to outside power grids. Right. And so when their systems failed, they became an issue of, well, we can't.
We can't import power.
We can't, because we're not structured to do that right now.
Which is sad because, again, those issues all just kind of build on each other. If you're trying to be independent, but also you don't have enough redundancy, that's not good. Also, if Texas were hooked up and were able to create excess power, then they could sell it to the grid. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's one of the issues that Texas has. We here have not necessarily the power issue. We kind of have an economy issue though. And, bringing it back to home, one of the things that my wife and I talk about, and this is a thing that every household talks about because you need to, is, okay, how do you make ends meet? You have two options, and only two options. You can either increase the amount of money that you bring in, or you decrease the amount of money that goes out, your expenditures. Those are the only things you can do. There's no other lines on the balance sheet. There's what comes in and there's what goes out. If that number at the end isn't positive, well, then you're in trouble. And right now, our number isn't positive. We bring in a lot of federal money. So if we wanted to be independent, if we wanted, like you said, to be able to wave that flag and say, no, we're going to do things the way that we know is right, and we don't have to take your federal money, then yeah, we have to do one of two things. We either decrease our expenditures or increase our income.
Right.
Or you do a combination of both. And mining is just one of those, it's for Idaho, it's low hanging fruit. It's, well, of course you mine stuff.
It's right there.
Yeah. Go get it.
Right. And something kind of similar on that idea of, income in, income out. Right. If your culture, or the main way that your populace, we'll put it that way, is generating money is from outside entities other than those in its geographic area of its culture. So I used a lot of big words there because that's just what came to mind. But basically,
remote work.
Yeah, remote work, that you say Facebook is hiring a bunch of jobs in CUNA, right? They're bringing that data center in. But is Facebook really an Idaho company that has an Idaho culture and wants to uphold Idaho values? No, it's not. And so you would really like for your populace to work for a bunch of companies, even if they're in other states that are Idaho-based with those Idaho ideals. And mining is one of those things that is very locally based. And something that this comes all into the other discussion about logging, and I want to do a segment on that as well, but the mining was the first one that came to mind, is that there are so many towns. Idaho used to have way, way more rural towns in the height of our mining days, about 30 to 50 more small towns in Idaho. They were able to live rural and enjoy the fruits of being in some of our beautiful mountains, and mining afforded people to have that, an honest living, and also supporting their state and country. But with environmental groups getting a little bit uppity, which, there again, I will grant that there were some areas where we did our mining which wasn't great, but welcome to the 21st century. There's got to be some improvements we could do and also make it still profitable. By bringing this mining back and growing it and encouraging it is only going to help those rural towns to grow and stay alive and to stay vibrant. Equally with logging, this argument works with both of those, so that the culture is still here in Idaho, that an Idaho mining company is supporting Idaho interests with Idaho workers, rather than, there's a bunch of people that live in Wallace and we saw the population go up in Wallace, but the vast majority of those growth of people there was because of the prevalence of remote work, which is fine. It's great. I got nothing.
It's a good thing.
It's a good thing, but that means a lot of those people, their paycheck, which is the most influencing factor on them, is not tied to the culture here in Idaho. It's tied to a culture in Silicon Valley or in California or Seattle or Oregon or something, rather than the culture that they're living in.
Well, and not only the culture, because that is one side of the coin, and it's a big side, so I'm glad you're talking about it. The other side of it, though, is economic. Like, yes, they're bringing in a paycheck from Facebook. Facebook is building a plant down in CUNA, and that's good. Like, that's money coming into our state. But Facebook is not based in CUNA. Right. So the wealth that is generated from that plant is leaving our state. It's going to, where's Facebook? Is Facebook Seattle or Portland? I don't know. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. The fact is, it's not in Idaho. It's going somewhere else. So yes, paychecks are coming here. And so money is coming in from that place in CUNA. A lot of money. It's going to be a good thing. But the wealth. And so I think that's two sides of the coin that we talk about when we talk about economics. Is we talk about our paycheck. Yes, the income, that's an important thing. But also wealth is the other side of income. It's what do you do with the income that you get? And if you are the owner of a business, well, you have the power to create wealth, and you have the power to decide what to do with that wealth.
Right.
And we've seen so many people in American history recently do things that aren't great with that wealth. They're running things into the ground. They're doing things culturally that we in Idaho disagree with. So again, if we're looking to be independent as a state, we need our balance sheet to make sense. But then also we need industries here that create wealth, and through that wealth we can continue our cultural, I don't know, relevance, or our cultural
and
we can
civil authority and independence.
Yeah. Because it's one thing to have a balanced sheet. It's another thing to also have wealth.
Which is why if you're sitting there and you're realizing, wait a second, why is it always California in the news making leftist policies? Well, because these states have very robust state economies that they can do these things and stand up to the federal government and stuff. If you're wondering, why don't you hear much about, New Mexico or Arizona or Kansas or Dakota?
You don't hear much about New Mexico because it's corrupt as corrupt can get, but that's a different story.
Yes, different story for a different time. But you might wonder, why we're a union. We have a ton of other states. Why aren't you hearing this more often? Well, I would argue, not looking into those, but I would suspect a lot of those states, just like us, have a lot more reliance on those federal tax dollars, and thus they're a little bit more quiet. And that brings me kind of to the last point here of the analysis before we kind of get to an application about all of this for you, is that regularly as conservatives, that we regularly hear on a national scale that we need to have America first, right? It's like the Trump "Make America Great Again." That's Trump's type of thing, right? And not globalism. We want nationalism. And I don't have an issue with it. I get it, and I think that's a good direction to move away from globalism more towards our interests first, and then obviously you want to take care of other people. But if you can't take care of yourself and keep your house in order, how are you going to take care of other people's houses? But I think I would almost press, especially with this example, that we hear about that all the time, but I would encourage you, listener, think of it even more not nationalism, but statehood. Being, for lack of a better word, I think it might be the word I'm looking for, but status, that you have national pride, but you also have state pride. That's something that if you look back, especially leading up to the Civil War and other parts in American history, that was an understood cornerstone of American civil society, is that, we are Americans, but also I'm an Idahoan. And in modern days, we've gotten, we're Americans, and the state part is like my denomination, for lack of a better word, to use kind of a Christian side of things. And that works to a point, but especially in this, I think it would be more encouraging and better for the union overall if we more focused on, okay, I am an American. I have a certain allegiance that we all as a union have shared values in the Constitution that we all agree on. But also, I'm an Idahoan, and I care very much about Idaho, sometimes more than I do the rest of the nation, in the interest of my local community.
Well, I think it stems from where value comes from in your life. And if value comes from the state, then you're going to be first and foremost a statist. Or if it comes from the federal government, then you're going to be a federal governmentist, I guess.
Yeah.
But the founding fathers had a different set of ideals that they lived by than the vast majority of people today. They had personal responsibility. And so first and foremost was, how do I govern myself? And so that's where I think a lot of their ideas came from, was from self-governance. First, I govern myself. Then I govern my family. Then I govern my city. Then my county. Then my state. Then my country. And it was like an inside-out governance. And at this point, I would say the U.S. majority, they flipped that around and they say, no, first governance comes from the outside. And then it comes more local, and then more local, and then more local. And finally, the last governance that happens, the very last one, is myself. I rely on their laws. I rely on their structures. I rely on everyone else to tell me what to do, until finally I don't have any decisions left to make because they're all made for me. So what do? Well, I just do what I'm supposed to. And that's a completely backwards and 180-degree different take. It's an inverted worldview from, I think, what our founding fathers had, and from what makes a successful home, a successful local community, a successful state, and a successful federal government, is that first we look locally. We look at our own lives first.
Right. And here again, for the person out there, I have no doubt, maybe I'm stirring the pot a little bit, but this also comes from a biblical principle that's taught in God's word, which hate it or like it, that is one of the founding books that influenced a lot of Western culture and what built America. And this idea of, even that language, I think that's the exact language it's using in God's word, is that if you can't have your own house in order, why should you try to go do someone else? Take the log out of your own eye before you take the speck out of your brother's. And if we believe that God's word is inspired by God and correct, and it's a manual for life, then how much more should we then apply that to the rest of society and the way we live and how it will function both in politics and different matters? Now, that moving into like our application, I wanted to give you guys some resources to go experience and see the stuff that we've talked about, because obviously this is stuff that's happened in Idaho. If you're up north or even in the southern part of the state, there's a lot of cool things you can go see and do. You can do different hiking trails, to go rock hounding, different exhibits and stuff. For here down in the valley, one of the main places you can go to kind of learn about that history and experience it in like a museum setting, if you don't want to go too rural, is the Idaho Museum of Mining and Geology in Boise. They have different tours you can do and presentations they have there. So that's another really great one. But then if you're up north, there's the Mining Heritage exhibit in Wallace. That one's also a really great one. They have some tours. I think they have some mines and different things the kids can do there. Then if you're more like you want to go out and do specific things or tours and actually see the physical places with yourself, there's a lot of tours up north because most of those mines up there in Silver Valley are there. There's the Sierra Silver Mine in Wallace. There's also the Crystal Gold Mine in Kellogg that you can go to. And then the last one, if you want to get your hands as dirty as possible, literally, there's some different areas you could go around the state to go rock hounding or do kind of your own mining or panning. In the Snake River area, which there are several that you can pan for gold. I know there is the Eagle City Park in Keystone, Idaho. That one, I think, has a little bit of a charge for it. Plus, if you want to go all out, there's the Idaho State Gem, the Star Garnet, which is only really found here in Idaho or India. But you can go the best way area for that, besides, maybe private claims or whatever else, is the Emerald Creek Garnet area, which is near St. Mary's. It is a U.S. Forest Service site located about an hour drive south of the town of Harrison. It is the only public digging site in the state. Granted, I think there's some places here in the valley that sell them if you don't want to go do that, but obviously you're probably wanting to go do it for yourself. The site is open from the Friday before Memorial Day through Labor Day each year. Permits are required and can be reserved online 90 days in advance at the recreational.gov. We'll have a link below for that. Visitors can dig in designated areas to collect garnets. The Forest Service provides a stockpile of garnet-bearing gravel and slough boxes to search for the gems. The facility is there for you with family or kids trying to understand, how big of a commitment it is. They have picnic tables, toilets. There's also parking. Granted, it's about a half-mile hike from the parking area to the slough boxes where they have there, and there's no drinking water, so just make sure to take that with you. Plus, if you're not going specifically for star garnets, I also know there's a lot of different places you can go over in the Owyhees to do some different rock hounding. You can go look that up. I didn't specifically search that. And I think there are some petrified wood stuff over in and around CJ Strike in that area and that valley. So those are also some really great resources if you want to go do your own little mining and see part of Idaho's geology. Which, with all that given about Idaho's mining history and giving you an overview of the bills signed by the governor, thank you for listening to the entire podcast. I sincerely hope you found it enjoyable and valuable. If we missed any important points or provided incorrect information, please feel free to reach out to us via email at localyokolidaho2022@gmail.com or on Twitter by tweeting me at localyokolidaho. With the small team we have, we're not able to cover everything, but we do our best to cover the most interesting and important stories. Thank you for your continued support and assistance. That's all for now, and I wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Godspeed.